So it's true that so many Americans come up to visit their Canadian citizen boyfriends, their Canadian citizen spouses, and they always come for a visit. In fact, that's the condition of their stay is to visit and then return back to the States. But what happens if you're trying to sponsor that person for permanent residency? In other words, your goal is to establish a viable relationship so that you can be sponsored as a common law partner or be sponsored as a spouse for permanent residency. So in this video, I'm going to explain just how to do that in a way that is not going to jeopardize the permanent residency application and not going to jeopardize your temporary status in Canada. Because when you do enter Canada every time, you're actually entering as a visitor. You're not entering as a permanent resident or permanent resident applicant. People get those confused all the time. So let's start with the beginning. When you're in a relationship with a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you are eligible to be sponsored for permanent residency in most cases, but you have to be one of two people. You have to either be a common law partner, which means you've cohabited together for 12 months continuously, or you need to be the spouse of that person. You can't just be in a dating like relationship. So when you are in a dating like relationship, you actually have to take that relationship and make it into a common law relationship, which means you have to live together for 12 months first. Well, that's very difficult to do if you live in different countries, right? So if you're an American and you want to make this possible with a Canadian citizen, there's two options. First of all, the Canadian citizen could come live with you in the United States. That is one option. And if that happens for 12 months continuously, then you can sponsor from the States and still do everything you need to do. Or you, as the applicant, could come live with the sponsor in Canada. Now, that's a bit trickier because when you come up to Canada, you're going to be asked, what are you doing here? What's the purpose of you being here? And if you say that I'm here to live with my Canadian citizen sponsor, they may not let you into the country because they have a big problem with people coming up here as visitors and then staying permanently. So you always would be entering as a visitor saying, I'm here to visit. I'm here to visit my boyfriend. And as you live together for 6 months, that's the time you get when you enter a visit as a visitor. You can apply online legally to extend the stay for another 6 months. So essentially, you're going to get 6 months on the initial entry, apply online, another 6 months. Now, the downside of this, and this is why most people don't like this option, is because you're not able to work in Canada while you're here as a visitor. So if you're someone that works remotely or you don't need to work at all, then that might work fine for you. But if you're someone that needs to work, then that's not going to be an option. So you'll be back to option one, which would be to either have the sponsor come live with you for 6 months in the States, or a combination of one and two where they come and live with you and then you go live with them. Regardless, if you want to be counted as this person that can be sponsored as a common law partner, you have to get the 12 months of continuous cohabitation before you're even eligible to be sponsored. Now, of course, if you are a spouse of that person, then you can be sponsored right away. But even if you are sponsored or you've applied to become sponsored, you can't just move to Canada right away. You have to actually do things in order. So you can apply to be sponsored, and that's going to take its time to process. Usually it takes around 10 to 12 months to process completely. But during that time, you're free to come up to Canada and visit Canada. Again, the two things are kept separate. Your application for PR is separate from your status as a visitor. They're not connected at all. So when you come to Canada, you cannot just present yourself and say, hey, it's okay, I've applied for permanent residency, I'm here to live in Canada now. No, you haven't been approved. So you have to wait until all that's approved before you can actually enter as a permanent resident, that is. But you can still enter as a visitor in the meanwhile. And that's where people get all mixed up about how to go about this, because often when they're selling their things in the United States, they're packing up their moving vans and they're coming up to Canada. They're doing so before the PR has been processed. And many times they get refused at the border or they get turned away because it appears that they're entering as a permanent resident when they're not actually a permanent resident yet. So you have to do things in order. You have to be careful on how you present yourself at the port of entry when you're being processed for permanent residency in sponsorship.